rescue crews are now inside the Upper Big Branch mine, moving as fast as they can to find 4 missing miners. As offshore drilling plans in the U.S. expand, a new audit shows MMS officials withheld information from staff in Alaska that could have impacted plans to drill there. And new efforts to limit oil and natural gas development in ANWR.
From the Energy News Center in Washington, D.C., this is the Energy Report with Susan McGinnis.
Good morning, I'm Susan McGinnis. Thanks for joining us for the Energy Report on this 8th day of April 2010. Rescue workers are back inside the Upper Big Branch mine in Montcole, West Virginia, looking for the 4 missing miners after Monday's devastating explosion that killed 25 others. Governor Joe Manchin says crews have a long day ahead searching for survivors. They will have to get out and walk part of the way.
32 of our brave rescuers are in the mines right now. They are advancing, and they're advancing on a man trip, as you know. Right now we still have the ability to move on these man trips. That they'll come to where they'll have to get off and start moving by foot, which will slow it down.
Mine owner NRC Energy has been repeatedly cited for safety problems, including 2 violations on the day of the blast. But Federal Mine Safety Administrator Kevin Strickland says they had nothing to do with it. Massey CEO Don Blankenship insists his company has a good safety record. He denies claims by some miners that he puts coal profits ahead of safety. MSHA is investigating this disaster, and Congress will start its own investigation after returning from spring break. Congressman Nick Rahal says mine workers have come to him since the blast to complain about unsafe working conditions. A new audit of the Federal Minerals Management Service says the agency withheld information from its own staff making decisions about offshore drilling projects in Alaska. The Government Accountability Office also says MMS never came up with guidelines to determine whether proposed OCS drilling projects comply with federal environmental law. Staffers planning environmental studies on OCS development in Bristol Bay say they were never told what scenarios were being considered, where pipelines might be located, and what other infrastructure might need to be built. The investigation came after the release of internal emails where officials dismissed warnings of problems that could be caused by offshore development. Federal wildlife managers say they might seek new wilderness protections that would leave the Alaska National Wildlife Refuge off limits to oil and natural gas drilling. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service says it's part of a comprehensive review of the way it manages ANWR, a process that's long overdue under federal law. Agencies are supposed to update their land use plans every 15 years, but Fish and Wildlife spokesman Bruce Wood says the ANWR plan has been in place for 22 years. The new protections being considered include designating some areas as wilderness or scenic rivers. If those protections are recommended, the Interior Secretary would decide whether to ask Congress to move forward. Public meetings will be held throughout Alaska during the next 2 months, and the draft plan is expected in February of 2011. Energy Secretary Steven Chu visits a Pepco service center in Maryland today to announce more than $168 million in stimulus funds for smart grid projects. DOE awarded the funds to Pepco in October to help build the smart grid in D.C., Maryland, and New Jersey, and the deal was signed on Wednesday. $149 million goes to Pepco, and Atlantic City Electric gets about $19 million for its smart grid projects. The formal start date for these projects is now April the 12th. Pepco's CEO says the funds will include advanced metering infrastructure, distribution, automation, and demand response technologies. Pepco says the money will help offset the cost to customers for installing meters and modernizing the grid. The NRC is asking the National Academy of Sciences to study whether people living near nuclear power plants experience any higher cancer risk than those who do not. NRC Chairman Gregory Jaczko says the last study found no higher cancer death rates, but it was done in 1991.
One of the things that we're considering looking at this study is not just the mortality rate, but the rate of incidence of disease as well. And I think that will give us some slightly better information than we have now about any possible implications from nuclear facilities. But right now we have information every day about the people who work at these facilities, and we certainly don't see anything that tells us that there's any difference really from the average population. We're really doing this because the science has changed a lot since 1991. We know a lot better now what the impacts of radiation are and how it affects the body, and how to do that from a calculational perspective.
Worldwide, there have been periodic claims of cancer clusters near nuclear generating plants, but such clusters also occur where there are no such plants, and no authoritative study has been able to find that normal plant operations caused a cluster. Constellation Energy has purchased a 70-megawatt wind project in Garrett County, Maryland. The deal was closed on Wednesday with Clipper Wind Power. Constellation says it'll be building and operating at least 28 turbines. The company expects the facility to start commercial operation by the end of this year. Constellation's wind project has a 20-year power purchase deal with the Old Dominion Electric Cooperative for energy and renewable energy credits produced by the facility. The U.S. wind industry is expanding, although manufacturing is growing at a slower rate. That's according to the American Wind Energy Association's new annual report. It says more than 10,000 megawatts of new wind generating capacity was installed last year, the largest year yet. The leader nationwide in terms of percentage of electricity generated by wind, Iowa, getting 14% of its power there. It says 10 new manufacturing facilities came online, with about 85,000 people now employed in the industry. Despite the economic downturn, the demand for small wind systems for residential and small businesses grew 15% in 2009, adding 20 megawatts of capacity to the nation. The report says offshore wind power is gaining momentum in the U.S., with 7 projects showing significant progress in the planning, permitting, and testing process. Top NASA scientist James Hansen, among the first who sounded the alarm on global warming, was awarded an environmental prize for decades of work on spreading awareness of climate change. In June, Hansen visits Oslo to collect the Sophie Prize, set up in 1997, and the $100,000 that goes along with it. This is an international environment and development prize awarded once a year. It was established by Norwegian author Jostein Gardner and is named after Gardner's novel Sophie's World. Talking to the prize panel, Hansen said the United States is not taking a path which is going to solve the problem, and said that other nations were also doing too little. Hansen said that world temperatures were on a rising trend despite what he called a well-orchestrated campaign in the past year to discredit scientific findings about global warming. Hansen is now director of NASA's Goddard School of Space Studies. He testified before Congress more than 20 years ago about the risks of global warming from human activities led by the burning of fossil fuels. Here's a look at some energy goings-on around the Beltway today. At 8 a.m., the EPA started a scientific advisory board meeting at the St. Regis Hotel on a hydrofracking study. Clean Skies News will be there. At 10 a.m., NRG President David Crane gives a speech at the National Press Club where he will release findings of a macroeconomic study on electrification. Clean Skies News will be there. 1:30, Energy Secretary Chu will tour the Pepco Rockville Service Center and announce that new stimulus funding for smart grid projects in the D.C. area. That is the Energy Report. Thank you for joining us in the Energy News Center. If you have any suggestions or comments about our programming here on Clean Skies News, you can find us at contact@cleanskies.com, and you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Susan McGinnis. You're watching Clean Skies News.